welcome to today's conversation, From P-glycoprotein to Terry Fox, a lifetime of cancer research. It's a conversation with Dr. Victor Ling. I'm Janet Rossant, and I'm President and Scientific Director of the Gairdner Foundation. This morning's conversation is part of a series of events that we're holding celebrating Canada's Gairdner Science Week. To see the full schedule of what's coming up, please visit the schedule section of the Hop-In or visit our website at gairdner.org. I'm very much looking forward to our chat today. Dr. Ling has a long and illustrious career and has really left his mark on Canadian science and research across the country and around the world. Not only is he a Canada Gairdner International Awardee, he was also the founding president and scientific director of the Terry Fox Research Institute. And he's very well known for his discovery of P-glycoprotein, the first molecule identified to really be responsible for drug resistance in cancer. So thank you for joining us, Dr. Ling.
It's a pleasure.
It's a pleasure to see you. We've known each other for a long time, so it's very nice to have this conversation. I thought it was a great opportunity because you are stepping down from your role at the Terry Fox Research Institute. And the TFRI has been a partner of Gairdner and continues to be a partner of Gairdner for many aspects of our programming over the years. So we really appreciate the partnership. And I thought it's a great opportunity to look back, maybe a little bit look forward. So let's go back. So I said, you are one of our Canada Gairdner International Awardees, 1990. Quite a long time ago now, for your discovery of P-glycoprotein and its role in anti-cancer drug resistance. So just tell us the story of that discovery. How did it come about? What parts of serendipity were mixed into that story?
Wow. It's getting back to the beginning. I think it's very interesting. But first of all, let me just say that it's a real honor to be here and to participate in this conversation. And I really feel grateful for this opportunity to share some of my life and hopefully might inspire some people. But as far as the Gairdner Award is concerned, I mean, it's Canada's most outstanding award for health sciences. And to be a winner of that award was just incredible from my perspective. And the discovery that led to that was actually very serendipitous, as you say. It wasn't an accident, you want to put it that way. I was a young scientist at the Princess Margaret Hospital and Ontario Cancer Institute. My grant was coming up. I've found nothing for the last 3 years and it needed to be renewed. And there was an enormous pressure to find something that I can renew it on. And part of the challenge was that I had a mindset. I wanted to learn something about cell division. So we decided to isolate mutants that are resistant to a drug called colchicine. Colchicine is a drug that binds the microtubule protein and causes the cells from undergoing through mitosis. So we thought that we can find mutation in those cells, and then we might learn something about cell division and ultimately something about cancer, because cancer is the disease of rapid and uncontrolled cell division. So that was the mindset. But everything that we tried, we could not find microtubule mutants. Instead, we have these funny mutants that are not only resistant to colchicine, but they were resistant to other unrelated drugs, and we just sort of discarded them all the time. And it was because of that, the pressure that we have to write something up for a grant, that we realized that, hey, we got to figure something out. What is this thing, these mutants anyway? They might be interesting. And the long story short is that these mutants turn out to be the multi-drug resistant mutant. They're resistant to almost every anti-cancer drug that we tested them on. And you know, the light bulb came on, Janet, as you know, and this is what scientists live for. That light bulb came on and you say, oh my goodness, I've been missing this all the time. This is important. And so this led to the discovery of P-glycoprotein, P because we didn't know what it really stood for. We thought it might be for permeability, but eventually it turned out to be a protein pump that was able to pump out a lot of drugs from the cells. But the Gairdner award was not only for that, which I think it was important, but it's in the same way, I would share the awarding time with people like Jack Reardon and Lap Chi Tsui and Francis Collin, who were working on cystic fibrosis. And their protein turned out to be part of the family, super family of the ABC transporters. So it's how amazing science can be. It's just, that's the thing that what every scientist lives for, is to find out things that they never imagined that could happen.
Yes, I like the idea of the light bulb, because obviously that's exactly what you needed. And you had to be ready. You were looking, it wasn't just about submitting the grant, although I'm sure that was a big push. But you saw the data, and all of a sudden you realized that this was going to make a really big impact. And we all hope for those moments, and they come in funny ways, but it is part of doing science, right? But of course, they say luck favors the prepared mind, and you were prepared to go down the pathway and see where it was going to take you.
Well, Janet, you're being very kind, I think. I was desperate. And I remember the reviewer of my grant said, well, he hasn't made much progress, but these mutants look very interesting. And I have to say, I was grateful for people like Jim Till and Bun McCullough at Princess Margaret that say, well, regardless of what, the NCI at that time will grant you, we will support you because we believe this is important. So having that support from your home institution is extremely important. Believing in a young scientist is extremely important.
So 1990, how old were you when you got the Gairdner Award? I haven't done that sum.
Well, I don't remember the age, but 90. I was born in 43, so I was 37, something like that. No,
the 40s, in your 40s. But it was really demonstrating that, which we see all the time, of course, that young scientists are often the ones who make these kind of breakthrough discoveries, because I think young scientists haven't got bogged down with writing grants and everything else and all the administration and all those ideas. The light bulbs are going off all the time. So it was great to see young scientists being supported, which you were. So it was,
and because you had a very important and very large research institute for quite a while. And I was privileged to be able to give money away to support research, is to know that you have to take risk. And since none of us can predict the future as to what a scientist may or may not discover, I think we just have to go by the track record of the person, whether they have been able to do good science or not, and take risks on young people. I think that's the future of science, personally.
We'll come back to that in a minute, because I want to get into the sort of period when you were at the Terry Fox Research Institute, where you clearly did play an important role in trying to promote young scientists and science in general. But let's stick with P-glycoprotein for a minute, and just if you think so, that was 1990 was the award. What has been the ongoing impact of that discovery in cancer therapeutics? How has the science and the applications evolved over the years?
Well, things never turn out the way you hope. The hope was that this was the major and maybe the only mechanism for drug resistance in cancer chemotherapy, and one were able to block the protein. Then a lot of the drugs that were not working would then work. It didn't turn out that way, because the cancer cell is extremely nimble, if I put it that way, able to change, mutate. And so I think even though many cells were resistant, probably because of P-glycoprotein, but they found other ways of overcoming drugs. And so drug resistance will continue to be a problem for us, I think, into the future. That being said, I think this protein has turned out to have some very fundamental role. It may have some, I think, clinical impact in children's cancer, and Dr. Brandon Galley and Dr. Helen Chen at the kids in Toronto have published some, I think, very important paper in those area, and created a protocol for treating some of the children's cancer using an inhibitor of P-glycoprotein, cyclosporin A. But it did not have the major impact that we thought it would have. And even though drug companies developed different drugs against P-glycoprotein, it did not change the outcome dramatically at all. However, I think what it does give us is that it shows that the P-glycoprotein actually play an important role in terms of preventing certain drugs from crossing the blood-brain barrier, for example.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And so we now understand that you can't block P-glycoprotein without causing potential harm for drugs that might cross blood-brain barriers. So this has a very large impact from a pharmacological perspective.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, interesting. So you never know where things are going to go.
You can't predict. Yeah.
Yeah.
And you know, to be, honest, we really don't know what is the real reason P-glycoprotein was invented in the first place.
Mm-hmm. Yes, yeah, for sure. Well, again, it takes a long time as well before you see the possible applications, because you talked about cystic fibrosis, and of course, the gene for CF was discovered a long time ago now, and it's only really recently, in the last few years, that we've started to see drugs coming to market that are actually based on understanding what the CFTR protein does. So, you can about something, but translating that into something therapeutic takes a while. And
absolutely. And we underestimate all the time how complicated things are, and how complex and complicated the molecular mechanism, how a cell function. I mean, there's so many feedback loops that it's quite amazing, really.
Yeah. So if you think about cancer therapies today, though, obviously there is some excitement in cancer therapies today, because we are moving into again, it's a bit like cystic fibrosis now already. Now we're beginning to actually do more therapies based on the genetic mutations. So you must feel quite positive about where cancer therapy is going today.
I am absolutely positive about it for two reasons. One is that I think in the whole area of immunotherapy, which we always felt theoretically, it should be helpful and maybe it should work, but we never really knew how to tackle it, because it's a very complex system. And now seeing, so many cancers that are certainly life have been extended significantly based on immunotherapy, and maybe in certain cases may be cured. We don't know. It's very heartening, and this is really an area that I think is very exciting. And then the whole idea that we now can identify with what we call precision medicine, where some of the driver mutations are causing the cancer, and being able to do that at a single cell level, we mean that ultimately we might be able to identify the causative cell at the very beginning, and maybe we deal with that. I mean, it's just a very exciting prospect ahead of us.
So that sort of perhaps leads us into then your role as founding director of the Terry Fox Research Institute, which is obviously you've just retired from that position. Gairdner is global, and our events go global. So maybe you could remind people about Terry Fox and his vision. I mean, Terry Fox for Canadians is a hero. There's no question about it. But tell us a little bit about Terry Fox and how you got involved with the TFRI.
Well, I got involved with TFRI because I think in 2005, the Terry Fox Run, which is the anniversary run for the Terry Fox Foundation, they raise more money than they anticipated. So Darrell Fox, who is the younger brother of Terry, said that he would like the extra money to be invested in something significant, and invited a number of scientists, myself included, to form a small committee to come up with some idea as to how the extra money might be invested. And so this is how I got interested in doing something different from just being a scientist applying for a grant. And so in this small committee, we came up with the realization that, a lot of us have made discoveries, but, there wasn't a whole lot of research because it wasn't being funded into what we call translational research at that time. That means that once a discovery is made, you still need a lot of work, maybe applied research, to figure out how it might work in a clinic or in application. So that was the reason for establishing the Terry Fox Research Institute in the first place, is to try and fund translational cancer research. And there was a promise of about $50 million from the Terry Fox Foundation. And so, I was at that time the vice president of research at the BC Cancer Agency. And Darrell was sitting across from me as we were talking now and said, Vic, we really need to find a director for the Terry Fox Research Institute, Translational Research Institute. Who do you think might fit that role? And I said, well, I don't know. And he said, well, would you do it? I would just sat back and I said, yes. I don't know what made me say that, within probably 1 second or less. But I just thought that, to be able to have the opportunity to start something new was really something that would be very exciting. And to make a big difference, it'd be very exciting. And so it was like, moving from being the VP of research of a provincial healthcare system, of a cancer care system, into a research institute that was, funded by donation. I think that was a big change, but it was the beginning.
Yeah, and clearly, by going across the country, and you've talked about already, the TFRI was able to pull together teams, particularly of young scientists, to take on the challenges. And the challenges, of course, that Terry Fox himself would have really appreciated. I mean, I always found that his vision was that it's not enough to do cancer research. We want a cure. That was everything. Really, everything has to be focused towards that final outcome. And so where we are today with the translation of cancer research, I think would have made Terry very, very happy. So it's a great opportunity to follow his vision.
I think that's a very, very insightful comment, Janet, because I think sometimes because we're not sure, because we say, well, maybe we'll never be able to cure cancer in that sense. So we try to, how would you say, dilute the vision in some ways. Mm. But I think at the end of the day, I think the vision need to be a pure vision. And it need to be maybe the ideal vision as to what we really like to see. And without going for that, I think we will always fall short. So we really need to reach for the star. I think really it's what we're saying. Yeah. And I think part of my saying yes was to be involved in a Terry Fox Institute that had the vision, and knowing that we might not get there within a short period of time, but it's a worthy vision to go for. Yeah. And this reminds me actually, Janet, in that when I was at the postdoc in Fred Sanger's lab in Cambridge, and we were the only two people. This was in the late 1960s, early 1970s, working on DNA sequencing, and we weren't getting anywhere, and I was just frustrated because everybody else was publishing amazing papers. And Fred and I were the only two people in the lab trying to work on DNA sequencing. And I said to Fred, I said, this is ridiculous. We'll never learn how to do this within, for the next 50 years. And he said, you think that's so? Well, somebody has to start. I mean, and it sort of hit me right there at that very moment, a defining moment for me. To say, if it's something really worthwhile doing, you have to start. It doesn't matter how long it's going to take. And so I take what you're saying about this vision. It's important. It's not a frivolous thing. It's doable. We should be able to do it.
Yeah, well, that's great. I like the quote from Fred, because that is basically, we've all had students and postdocs in the lab who are afraid to start. And every now and again, you do have to just kick them and say, try it. We don't know if it's going to work until you try. It's amazing how people will not want to do that. So let's just sort of go down a bit of a personal journey then for a little bit, just as we sort of move towards the end here. Tell us about your early years. How did you get into science in the first place? You were born in China. You're an immigrant like me. Canada has many successful immigrants, I like to say. But tell me a little bit about your family history, and was there science in the family? How did you get into science in the first place?
Yeah. Well, I think I am an immigrant, and I arrived here in Toronto, actually, when I was about 5 years old. We immigrated from China via Hong Kong. My father is a businessman, and my mom helps in the family business. And he's an importer of dry goods, tablecloth linens, and sell them wholesale or retail. So we had a store in Toronto called Ling's, and as a kid I worked in that store selling stuff. And so I guess maybe that's how I learned how to write grants. I don't know, but but I think so. Neither one of my parents have graduated from high school, but that's not a norm, not for their time. But they really believe in education. So they never push us, but they always say, as long as you are in school, we will support you. And but once you're out of school, you have to support yourself. And so that's a real incentive to stay in school. And so we stayed in school and went through university, and I went for my PhD and still being supported by my parents, which is amazing, right? But I think the long and short of all this is that I think my desire to become a scientist was based on, as a kid, I loved to read. And my sister sort of got me a library card, and I just, in the summertime, I just went to the library and read as much as I could. And when I read the biography of Isaac Newton, I thought that was the most creative thing. I mean, he saw what everybody saw, apple falling from a tree. Nobody wanted to ask a question about why it fall, but he asked that question. And I said, how creative can that be? I said, I would love to do that. And that wasn't grade 8 at that time. It's amazing when you think about it. It was that defining moment. I can remember that. And so ever since, I never thought about I wanted to be anything else other than to be a scientist. People say, oh, you want to be a doctor, you want to maybe want to go in business like your parents or whatever, but no. It never occurred to me to do that.
Oh, that's interesting. So very early on, a scientist.
Yeah, and I'm really grateful that I was able to make that decision early on. I know that I see so many young people, and after they've gone through many years of education, they're still not sure what they wanted to do.
Yeah. So what about sort of scientific role models, heroes, etc. along the way? You've mentioned some already, actually. So who would you, if you look back, who had the most influence on your career?
I would say a couple of people. I would say, and I say it in all sincerity, I think some of my public school teachers, high school teachers, I think they saw a spark and they encouraged it. I don't know whether they knew that or not, but I think, when I think about it, I'm just grateful that the Canadian education system, do employ teachers that are, truly good teachers. They encourage all kinds of creative thinking and excellence. Not necessarily, perfection, but they encourage discussion, debate, creativity. And so one of my favorite teacher was an English teacher. I mean, she would read poems and play music to us and try and get us interested in poetry. And that, in a way, it's sparked a creativity, I think, in all of us. A music teacher enthusiastic about that. Even my Latin teacher was enthusiastic about Latin. I mean, and I took 5 years of Latin. I mean, can you imagine that?
I did too. So I always enjoyed Latin poetry. I think I can probably still quote some.
But I think that those role models, I think, are very, very important. And of course, as I move on, I learn a lot from. I think I have so many mentors, really, people that. But I find that you really have to ask them to be a mentor in a sense, maybe without directly asking them, but seeking their advice whenever you can. And people love to give advice.
So let's turn it around the other way then. So now you are a mentor and have been a mentor to many young scientists. What is your best advice to young scientists?
Don't listen to what I say, number one. Well, I mean, in the sense that, I think everybody needs to follow their own instincts and gut feeling. And at the end of the day, you got to own whatever you want to do, and you will not regret it. And I think that's my best advice. Listen to as many people as you want, but at the end of the day, don't think that you should follow anybody's advice. Listen to your gut feelings. I think that will win the day. And even if you fail, learn from the failure, because that's really, and that most of us fail 90% of the time, but that's you live for that 1% or the 2% of the time when something actually happened. And but you got to persevere through those really tough times.
Yeah. So it's true, and I like the idea that the mention you made for high school teachers, because I think when I ask successful scientists, how did they get into science and what influenced them, the number of times that an important high school teacher is mentioned, including myself, it's so important. But we have to now think about our high school students and encouraging high school students to take up and stay in careers in science, in STEM. Do you have any advice to high school students?
Oh my goodness, Janet! I don't know. Most high school students would not listen to my advice anyway, probably. But what I would say to them is, we live in a world now where things are amazing. I mean, the technology, you can learn anything you want. And so I think at the end of the day, I think one needs to maybe focus on a few things and try to really enjoy those and do them well. Because if you try to do everything, it's just not going to happen. You're not going to, well, I don't know. But for me, I think having some boundary about what you want to do will allow your creativity to flourish. Some people said you can't have real creativity with a boundary. In other words, if there's no boundary, you don't know what creativity is. And so you have to have boundary in order to exercise and develop your creativity.
That's great. So I think creativity within the context of structures and organizations. But it is true, of course, that science today, research today is incredibly exciting, as you said. So it's an opportunity for young people to stay with a career in science. But even if they don't take up a research career, they're not all going to turn into, Gairdner awardees by any stretch of the imagination. But science is so important for our everyday life. So, science literacy is something that we all need to encourage in the next generation. For sure.
I agree with you, Janet. And especially nowadays, and you just said, there's so much information out there. You really need to think carefully about, how do you think? What's real, what is useful, what is just things out there that probably doesn't help you at all.
Yes. We do have to deal with the era of false information and so on, which is a topic for a whole different conversation, I believe. So maybe this is the time at which to say thank you very much, Vic, for a great conversation. Thank you for all your contributions to Canadian science, and I hope you enjoy I'm sure it's not a restful retirement, but at least stepping down as head of the TFRI. And we look forward to interacting with you a lot in the years to come. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And thank you, the audience, for joining us today. I'd like to take a moment to thank our sponsors for their support for this event and Gairdner Science Week as a whole. Up next, we have a public lecture, Genetics as a Way of Thinking, with 2021 Gairdner laureate Mary Claire King. And I think you're going to find that a very interesting and exciting talk as well. So to check out the full slate of Gairdner Science Week events, please visit the schedule section of Hopin or go to our website at gairdner.org. So thank you.